Hello, welcome to Alan's Music Room. It is Sunday evening, and we are actually talking about Saturday night, which makes no sense at all. We are here going to be talking about the music of SNL, the history of Saturday Night Live musical guests, musicians as hosts, good music skits, spoofs, bad musical guests. We're going to talk about the gamut. Before we get into that, though, we are going to be coming up with some great shows in the next week or so. Next week, we're doing a show about musical conspiracy theories. It's going to be all kinds of things. Paul is dead. Is he really? And a couple of other topics. And then the week after that is July 4th, which I think I'm going to have a pre-recorded show that week. So stay tuned for more details about that. Anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, do me a big favor and subscribe to my channel. That would make me ever so happy. And tonight we are going to get talking about SNL. So let me introduce my guests for the evening. Vandy Beth Glenn, how are you?
I'm good, Alan. How are you?
Wonderful. It is always a joy to see you.
Likewise.
Henry Hanks, how's it going?
Sorry, hello, I'm muted. I'm back.
Excellent. And Ian McCann.
Hi, how are you doing, guys?
Splendid. How are you?
Doing good. Just trying to beat the heat.
Yeah? You got iced tea with you?
No, I'm afraid not.
We had a little iced tea discussion before we went live. Tea is not a thing. Anyway, okay, so do me a big favor and introduce yourselves. Say a little bit about who you are and when you first started watching SNL. Like, how long have you been an SNL viewer? Vandy, why don't you start us off?
Hi, I'm Vandy Beth Glenn. I am a filmmaker in Decatur, Georgia. Oh, we lost Ian.
We did. Good Lord. That's all right. He'll be back. I have faith.
Okay. And I have been watching Saturday Night Live my whole life. And when you asked me to be on this show, or when I volunteered, when I insisted that I be on this show,
basically, right?
It got me to thinking about watching Saturday Night Live as a kid. As a kid, I loved to watch Saturday Night Live, and I also loved Mad Magazine. And my parents hated them both. Especially my mom thought they were subversive and immoral and et cetera, et cetera.
Sounds just like something a kid would want to watch.
But she never stopped me from watching Saturday Night Live. And
nice.
She never forbid me to read Mad Magazine. So points to Mom on both of those counts.
Henry, tell us about you.
Oh, yeah, let me think. I probably saw reruns of the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman years on Comedy Central back in 93 or somewhere around there. So that was my first exposure, because also, seeing the late night show in middle of the afternoon, is more accessible to a teenager, I guess. So, after watching a lot of reruns, I got into the new shows around season 19, which started to go a little downhill at that point. But
that's all right. There's lots of hills to climb. Ian.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to out myself as probably the youngest member of the group here. I was actually trying to figure out when I did start watching SNL, doing a little prep for this. And I come to realize it was the 25th anniversary special.
Oh, funny.
Which is what kind of brought me to it. And I'm kind of a sucker for things that have a little bit of already embedded history, so I can kind of go back and research it. My little archaeology digs. And that's what really kind of brought me into the show, was just kind of seeing kind of a little bit of the history of the show and at the time. And ever since then, I've been kind of like an avid watcher of it, really.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's the thing that got me hooked on both Star Trek and Doctor Who, is that I love things that have their own built-in history that they can then mine. And so when I came into both of those shows, I was so excited to go back and dig up the history of both of those. So my name's Alan. I have been an SNL viewer off and on, mostly on, since season 2. Season 2.
76.
What? I know, right? I missed season 1 somehow. I had friends at school who were like all chatty about the show. And so I guess it was season 2. I don't remember exactly what episode. It was sometime in the early part of season 2 that I started watching. And I've been a regular viewer and a sort of a SNL aficionado ever since. So tell me a little bit about some of the favorite musical guests that you remember. There's obvious ones, that get talked about all the time. The famous ones like Elvis Costello when he stopped his song, and yeah, exactly. But who are some of your favorites and why? And anybody who wants to jump in, jump in.
Well, well, before I get to that, I want to mention, like you said, in my generation, it was kids doing Chris Farley, Adam Sandler impressions. That was another thing that got me into it. But recent favorites, and I got a whole list, but my recent favorite would have to be David Byrne. Right before the pandemic, he did an amazing performance.
Yes, that was
like
phenomenal.
The last musical performance, really, before the pandemic, just about. So,
yeah, that was an incredible performance. Who else?
Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ian.
I was just trying to think of what I most recently had seen, and one of the newer people that I kind of discovered through SNL was actually Harry Styles, and I think this was in the last pandemic season. I tend to avoid boy bands as a general rule, but like Miley Cyrus beforehand, a great performance. I was like, wow, they actually can sing, and it's kind of made me a bit of a Harry Styles fan, rather reluctantly through time. But that was the more recent example of someone that really kind of blew me away, and experiencing them through the show.
One of my questions after this was going to be, who is someone that you discovered by SNL that you've become a fan of? So good answer to that question.
Something that really sticks out for me is every year they have not every year, but most years they have a Christmas show, and I always enjoy those. And sometimes they incorporate Christmas music into the show, and I always really enjoy that. And in particular, back, I believe it was in the 80s, Buster Poindexter was either their band leader or he was involved in their band. Anyway, he was in a lot of episodes. And he did a duet on "Baby It's Cold Outside" with Sigourney Weaver, which is just, I know people consider that song problematic these days, but still.
That may have been the very first of the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman season, I believe, Sigourney Weaver. So
yeah, it was in the late 80s.
Could be, but anyway, Sigourney Weaver and Buster Poindexter did a duet on "Baby It's Cold Outside," and it's just wonderful. And not only well sung, but the two of them really got into their parts and hammed it up. And so it was sweet, and it was a good song, and it was funny all at the same time. And that's something that has always stuck out in my memory as one of my favorite musical performances on the show.
Okay, so are there ones other than Harry Styles that you have discovered by seeing them on SNL and have become a fan of?
Years and years ago, when Lady Gaga was sort of coming out, maybe she'd been around like a year, like famous about that time, and I was like, okay, she's unusual, not that impressive. But then she did, an acoustic, not acoustic, but like a piano, just her singing with a piano.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, now she's stripped down to her talents, and then I appreciated, saw that she was a good talent, because there was the flashy stuff wasn't there. So
right, and actually, she's one of my answers to that question as well. The first time she hosted, she wasn't a musical guest, and then the first time she performed, both of them really grabbed me. But we'll get into those in a minute. Who else?
What I want to know, Alan, is why isn't Harry Styles good enough for you?
I never said.
You said who's a musician you discovered through Saturday Night Live, and you said, but you can't answer Harry Styles.
I didn't say it quite like that. I just meant he'd already been said.
Alan's just trying to go in a different direction. We're all going in one direction. It's all good.
Oh.
But my answer would be Olivia Rodrigo from just a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
Because I'd heard her talked about a lot, but I hadn't ever sat down and listened to her before. And then she did those two amazing performances. On Saturday Night Live, and I just love her.
And if I remember rightly, her album hadn't actually come out yet. She had released 3 singles, those 2 songs, and a third one, and the album was just about to come out. So the timing of that was really like right on. And she had built up a hell of a lot of press, particularly in England. I think she wasn't quite as well known here, but that was her first big exposure to an American audience, and she was fantastic. I really enjoyed her. Ian, do you have somebody else?
Well, since you brought that up, one that I've kind of retroactively discovered was Kate Bush. Going back to the early years of SNL. I think it's maybe season 4 or 5.
It was
probably Kate Bush's last major appointment in the U.S. was on SNL, and that was just a fantastic discovery to discover Kate Bush. And I mean, it's such a great performance. You know, the man with the child in his eyes, absolutely bizarre. And then that was just kind of like she went, packed up her bags and flew back to England and never came back over here again.
Basically,
yeah. But recently, Dua Lipa. Dua Lipa. I really kind of went through a wormhole of her recently for the latest season, so that was good.
That's nice.
She's pretty great.
One of mine was from a few seasons ago, and I don't remember exactly what season it was. It was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was Janelle Monáe. I mean, it had been kind of, whatever season it was, it had been kind of like okay performances up to that point, and she just blew me away. Absolutely amazing. And I was familiar with her before that, but that was the first time I'd actually really watched her perform, and she was incredible. Just amazing.
Yeah, that's a thing about Saturday Night Live. It's a live musical performance, and not every musician is good live.
Right.
And some musicians who are good live are only good actually live and in person, and their charisma doesn't transmit through the TV screen as well. So if you can find somebody who is good under those circumstances, then it's really a special thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As we learned with Ashley Simpson, Lorne Michaels does not allow lip syncing, any of that stuff. He still to this day, I think, denies that was ever allowed, so.
Well, but it way back at the very beginning, ABBA, they did not perform live.
Right.
They sang to a track, or they performed
at some point he changed that the policy. But
and there were a couple of people who like pre-taped their performances and they were transmitted, but they didn't perform live in front of the audience. What's that?
Carly Simon did that in the old days.
Because she had terrible stage fright.
Yeah.
And found it
She
debilitating.
Was still fantastic. So.
Oh yeah, of course. And I was trying to think of since we mentioned Lady Gaga, the first time I saw her perform, I was really kind of knocked out by it. But it was, and I think this was prior to that, the first time she hosted. That's what really got me. She came out and she was funny. She was like one of those people who would just, basically do anything the writers asked her to do, no matter how silly it was. She was self-deprecating. There were a couple of jokes in skits that were pointed directly at her, and she just totally sold them. But the final skit of the night was this skit where she is playing herself as an old woman whose career is long over, and she's washed up. And Keenan comes in as like the maintenance guy, and she's lonely and she just needs someone to talk to, and the whole world remembers who Beyonce is. Beyonce is still a queen, but nobody remembers Lady Gaga. And it was so sweet and so It had like a real tinge of melancholy to it, and I just thought it was an amazing skit. And from that point on, I was like, I love this woman.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't even a performance that really sold me. It was her performance as a host. So go ahead.
I said it's really nice to see some musical guests, when they are the host, actually have the chops to do it. Not all musical guests are made equal. Not at all.
This is true.
I thought Ariana Grande was great. She did a cut. There was a cut sketch where she did a Judy Garland impression that was terrific, which didn't make the show, but it was actually a really good impression. So.
Yeah, she was one of the ones that really surprised me. Anyway, Vandy, you were going to say?
Yeah, it's a musician who served as host who really surprised me and impressed me was Chance the Rapper. Whose music I was not that familiar with, and I'm still not that familiar with. But he came in and he hosted, and he was just as funny and had comic timing and was as good as any of the actors and comedians who come in and host. So that was very gratifying to see.
I remember that show. He was really happy and enthusiastic to be there, which goes a long way sometimes in this type of material.
I'm thinking of Bruno Mars, who didn't host but appeared in some skits, and he seems like
he did host. I think he did host. Actually.
Oh, did he?
Good. Yeah.
I may be forgetting that one, but
I
remember
the sketch where he was dressed as a mouse, and he did several.
Oh, that's right. But I'm thinking of, I think it was the first time he was a musical guest when they had him in a skit, and it was the Pandora radio servers had gone down, and he had to do all these musical impressions as to simulate people changing stations or whatever, and he was dynamite. He was absolutely amazing. And it's not been, I mean, it's kind of not really recent. It's from the very beginning, it wasn't a tradition to have musicians, if they're a musical guest, appear in skits necessarily. It only happened a time or two. I remember the first one that I really clearly remember was Tina Turner was hosting back in season 7 or 8 or something. And the show opened with, now I'm forgetting the character's name. I must say, who was that?
Ed Grimley.
Ed Grimley, thank you. So he's in his apartment, and he's like all excited because his neighbor is going to come over, and he's all sweet on his neighbor, and she's going to borrow a cup of sugar, and he's all excited to meet her. And it's going to be somebody completely dorky and just nerdy and stuff. And in walks like Tina Turner in this knockout red sequin miniskirt, and it was amazing. And that's really the first one that I remember. Mick Jagger may have done a time or two before that.
Well, Paul Simon.
Yeah.
Well, Paul Simon did. That's true.
Paul Simon went back and forth between hosts.
Yeah,
he was the third host, Paul Simon. Yeah.
But I meant go ahead.
Musically on the show. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as people who were booked as a musical guest appearing in a skit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there anything that Paul Simon, musically wise, hasn't done on SNL? I think he's kind of done everything going forward at this point.
Right. And how many people can you say showed up on stage in a turkey outfit?
Yeah. I think Mick wasn't hosting, but Mick Jagger did the really great thing with Jimmy Fallon, where he were looking in the mirror and Jimmy Fallon was doing Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger has hosted though.
He has.
Yeah.
That's true. But no, I don't think the time when he was doing that, I think he was just, maybe it was either him or the Stones were the musical guests.
I remember him hosting and doing the Californians, among others.
Oh my God, that was the worst. Oh my God. Who are some of the musical guests that you really did not like? I was going to say hated, but we don't want to go too negative. Who did you really just not like?
I remember the first time the Pretenders were the musical guests. I had never heard of the Pretenders before, and they performed "Tattooed Love Boys," and I don't know what was going on that night. Maybe everything was fine. It just hit my ear wrong, but I hated that song because I hated that song, I hated them too. I thought they were terrible. I wanted nothing to do with them. Who are these Pretenders people? They really are pretenders, apparently. Right. And and I just wrote them off. And then years later, I heard them on the radio. I thought, oh my God, this is great. Who is this? Wait, it's the Pretenders.
It's
Wow.
those damn Pretenders.
I love the Pretenders.
Yeah.
They're not pretending anymore.
And not only was I an instant fan, I went out and got all their albums at that moment. But the song that they were playing that did that to me was also Tattooed Love Boys. So,
That's funny. So
yeah.
it's a song that you like now.
It is. Well,
Nice.
Well, now there's nothing by the Pretenders that I don't like.
There you go.
I'm a hardcore Pretenders stan.
Nice.
But anyway, as I noted earlier, a lot of acts just don't translate well to the format of performing on the SNL stage.
Mhm.
I thought the Go-Go's were pretty bad in their first appearance.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember right around that same time, back in the first 5 years, I got introduced to all kinds of stuff that I did not understand. Like, I remember seeing the B-52s for the first time, and that was insane. And I didn't like it at all. Of course, I flipping love the B-52s now.
Mm-hmm.
And Devo was one that I was like, what the shit is going on? I don't understand this. But in the first 5 years, they did a lot of cutting edge kind of stuff and a lot of fringe kind of bands and a lot of stuff that you wouldn't see anywhere else on American television, like Peter Tosh.
Mhm.
Right.
So it was quite an education for me.
Yeah. When I was watching the first 5 seasons, I've actually from start to finish. And you mentioned those 2 of those were season 5. Season 5 of SNL was right on the cusp of new wave and punk being big, and they happened to just hit it so well. They had Blondie. I have a list here: Blondie, Bob Dylan, well, obviously Chicago, Tom Petty, the Heartbreakers, David Bowie, of course. First time he was on SNL.
Oh my God.
You mentioned B-52s and Devo and Gary Newman, who's a big new wave guy from the early days.
I remember that one as well.
So it was specials and Sam and Dave, a lot of great ones. Grateful Dead. That was the season they were on all cylinders with the musical guests. Season 5. So.
Oh yeah. It's interesting too because the musical guests are not paid. They come on the show at their own cost. If there's anything that they want to do special with the staging, it's up to them to foot the bill. So the times when like Kanye or whatever is doing like a green screen kind of thing with projections and stuff, that's all on his tab. And it's basically you're going to get record sales out of this, and that's how you get paid. But I remember, and that's sort of a recent thing with people doing really elaborate stage setups and changes and things like that. But you just mentioned David Bowie from '79. Every one of his performances was a completely different vignette, kind of. Everyone was costumed differently. And the third one, which was Boys Keep Swinging, was done sort of probably blue screen at the time, with his head and the puppet body, the marionette body, which is just insane. And it was almost like his 3 performances were 3 live music videos. They were so different. They were so heavily produced. They were so visually artistic. It was really interesting.
I'm actually surprised. Yeah.
What's that?
You remembered it. That was the whole point. So you would go and talk about it. And that's what a lot of these people have now is their one shot. I mean, they come on 11, 12 o'clock in the night. You got to hit them over the face and say, we're here and we're there. You can't just bring out some guys and a little drummer boy and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Nobody's that good at, 12 a night. So, but it has gotten increasingly visual over time.
Yeah.
I'm
actually surprised that they allowed that David Bowie thing because the marionette was anatomically correct.
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's funny, too, because they objected to one of the lyrics in the song and made him change that, but they never noticed that the puppet's penis would, shoot up out of his pants. So that completely went on air. but a lyric change, had to be made, or he couldn't do the song. And Bowie appeared 3 times or 4 times.
At least 3.
3, definitely.
I know.
Well, no, I
Seinfeld
think
hosted and had Bowie on, and there was another couple times.
right, and one with 10 machines, so 4 total, I think.
Yeah.
And it's funny too because the first 5 years, season 6 was such an utter disaster because Lorne Michaels had left and Jean Domanian had come in as the new showrunner, and she was terrible at her job. She's gone on to be very successful since then, but the interesting thing is that she was sort of his left-hand man for the first 5 years, and one of her jobs was booking the musical guests. And by all accounts, she was brilliant at her job.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the natural one to turn the show over to when Lauren left, and it was just a trash heap.
Yeah.
I think she got a bit unlucky. Lauren knew everybody. This man had Beatles on tap. And also, and this is a point I wanted to make about how there's just a tinge of adhering to like old school vaudeville. You have Desi Arnaz, and then you have the Beatles invading, and all the biggest hits you could think at that time period with Lauren.
Yeah.
But when you transfer to When He Goes, you have the one Jean Domanian year.
Yeah.
And she's kind of unlucky because she's coming right in off of when Lauren left and right before MTV starts. She's really, really unlucky. But I think and then one of my favorite performances I wanted to mention, actually in that year, is from James Brown. The episode, him and he does like 15 minutes, and he's just, if you can feel through the grainy video, his performance, the sweat, and just what his whole repertoire. And it's just an amazing, amazing performance of his. Of course, next week they've got like Ellen Shipley and like the Pirates of Penzance. But that's the nature. That's the nature of a variety show in SNL. You're not always going to love what you're going to get, but somebody will. That's the beautiful thing.
I remember that Pirates of Penzance episode very, very well. It was insane.
Yeah. Even if you love Pirates of Penzance, do you really want it in the middle of the night on SNL?
Right.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
But I think the one good thing we could say about the Dick Ebersol area that he did well was booking musical guests.
I 100% agree with that.
He really nailed it.
Yeah.
No matter what any other thing with the cast or who they had on for actual host, music guest, he really nailed it on the head. And I mean, I think we have MTV to thank, but he definitely was drawing from that. Gary Newman and the Cars Exploded, Rick Ocasek, just down the line.
Yeah. I'll say there were 2 things Jean Domanian did well. She hired Eddie Murphy. She didn't know what to do with him, but she did hire him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but she hired him kind of under pressure. I mean, from her staff.
Right.
I mean, they said, you have got to hire this kid.
Right.
So she didn't do it like of her own volition.
She didn't discover him per se, but. And then, of course, she picked Prince to be on, which his performance was moments before the infamous F word, Charles Rocket, so it almost got forgotten for a while.
Right, that's very true. That's very true.
But then you mentioned 15-minute performances. Prince came back, and his last time, I think, on SNL, he did like a medley of 3 or 4 songs. He probably would have kept doing them if they let him.
Right. He basically did his 2 performance slots as one long slot in the middle of the show, where he did all pieces of all the songs from his Third Eye Girl album or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. It was odd. Very odd.
And then he rocked the after show. So
that's true.
That was technically his last SNL performance. It was just off camera.
Yeah.
But yes.
But it's interesting you're talking about the Dick Ebersol 4 years that he did. He really sort of got away from doing the more fringe act, the avant-garde kind of acts. He went for headliners, basically. And I think a lot of my favorite performances, like I remember seeing Sade was on the episode that Tom Hanks hosted, and that was really good. She was amazing, actually. And I will never forget this. The first song she did, she had bright red lipstick on, and it got all over her big, beautiful white teeth. So she did the whole song with lipstick all over her teeth. It was adorable. Yeah. So what about some of the musical persons who have been good hosts? because the first thing that comes to mind for me is Justin Timberlake is just one of the greatest hosts
he's an
the show has ever.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
He could practically be a cast member. He's so good.
Totally.
Yeah. I think Paul Simon and Timberlake may be the only two musicians who have done the Five Timers Club.
Right.
Well, Paul Simon's only in the Five Timers Club in a technical because he's only officially hosted 4 times, but he's been he's been a musical guest so many times that
they counted that as another hosting. I guess
they gave him.
That's right. You get him on that technicality. You make him suffer.
Yeah.
They gave him a key to the Five Timers Club anyway.
Right.
Garfunkel is sending you your check right now as we speak.
I revisited Elton John, and he did stuff that was kind of clearly out of his element, and he was just willing to do whatever. And so he was, he was a good sport about everything. So I enjoyed him on there.
Well, if we're gonna talk about Justin Timberlake, we should also talk about his collaborations with Lonely Island.
Hell yes.
And all the and SNL digital shorts he's done.
Absolutely. Won a Grammy. I mean, Dick in a Box wins a Grammy. That's insane. I mean, I love it. I hated it the first time I heard it. I thought it was crass and juvenile and kindergarten, humor. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. And I think
it is. But I think
it's
more to appreciate.
Right. I think it's the funniest thing in the world now.
It is all those things, but I think I also think the 2 sequels to it were both smarter and funnier.
Yeah. They could have really done a terrible job with trying to do a sequel to that. I know they did a sequel to the Chronicles of Narnia that no one remembers, but
oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, no one remembers it.
But Lonely Island really kind of revolutionized music in the more modern SNL anyway. Even now after Adam Sandberg and them have gone, they really do try to do like filmed music video spoofs.
Oh yeah.
As much as they can. If they can, almost every episode it seems nowadays. More bang for your buck if you can get the guest in early and film something like that.
Exactly.
And so it definitely has its influences for sure there with what they accomplished.
Well, it's an easy thing to stick in a show lineup and give the cast and the set changers more time to do their stuff before the next live skit comes on. So
absolutely,
it serves its purpose.
You can put it in anywhere. Yeah,
right. But interestingly, they've really gotten away from doing the spoof commercials in favor of doing that kind of thing.
That's
and
true.
The commercials for the first 20, 30 years is one of my favorite aspects of the show.
They still do them.
They still do them, but not nearly as often.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think there was
before.
guaranteed one commercial per episode for a while, and now there's a lot less than that.
Yeah. I mean, you rarely see them anymore.
The kids aren't going to be downloading spoof Alka-Seltzer commercials off Apple. They're going to go for Dick in the Box. That's what's going to make you the money and the hit.
Right.
That's just
it could have been a decision by Lauren that ads are no longer 2021
sure.
relevant.
I mean, we're in the streaming, generation.
Yeah.
It's not really as much of a thing. And it's interesting that Lonely Island, what they really did was they sort of reinvigorated SNL in the sense of bringing it into the YouTube generation, bringing it into, you don't have to sit and watch an entire episode from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. You're going to get chunks of it the next day. And the Lonely Island stuff is the stuff that really started to become big YouTube sensation kind of things. And that's really what sort of changed the show's fortune, I think.
Yeah, and some random fan uploaded it there. NBC wasn't doing anything at that point.
Yeah, totally.
And
it spread into other things as well. Look at late night talk shows. Absolutely, it's gone. I mean, having Jimmy Fallon and Lorne Michaels producing half of them helps. But I mean, generally, that little bit of clipped skit or whatever they have that makes those hits, it's gold for them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I suspect a third of the people who know about what's going on at SNL these days only watch what's put on YouTube.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't doubt that at all.
If you look at the page views versus the ratings, it's probably blows it away. It's a really popular sketch.
I mean, I can't even remember how many years it's been since I've watched the show live. I always watch it later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do every Saturday
I
night.
made a point to watch Eddie Murphy live. I've seen it.
Oh, yes. Oh, I wasn't missing that one.
Yeah, that was a big night, wasn't it?
Oh, my God. That was amazing.
Who was his
Who was
music?
the musical guest? I'd have forgotten.
I don't remember.
I think it was a fairly big name. But
It was a big name, definitely. But I
course.
can't remember who it was.
Hang
I'm
on.
mean,
gonna have to Google now. It's gonna bother
I'm sure
me.
Wiki can tell us.
I've got the page
Yeah.
open right now.
Okay.
Or at least I thought.
Oh, Lizzo! I love Lizzo. How could I forget Lizzo?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
The perfect combination.
Now, yeah,
let me
she
tell
was
you.
right at the peak. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
she may still peak more, but she was at the peak of her fame then.
It's interesting because like SNL is part of what put Adele on the map. You know,
Yeah.
her first performance. So
It was interesting when she hosted, and she had not been really done too many appearances after her huge weight loss, and so we were seeing like the new Adele
Right.
doing all these sketches. So it was like a sort of a relaunch of her career or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the funniest things that I've ever seen in the entire history of SNL is Janet Jackson doing the Cork Soakers skit.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. It was clear that she was up for anything at that point.
Right. And just the fact that she could not say the word is just made it all the funnier. Oh my God. Amazing.
Yeah, that was an example of how the show has changed, because when I know when Lorne Michaels was designing the show, he was adamant that it would be not like any other TV comedy that there had ever been, and in particular, he hated the fact that Harvey Korman and other people on the Carol Burnett show were always breaking character and giggling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that trickled down to the cast too, because I know Belushi hated that.
Mm-hmm.
He hated wearing the bee antenna because that was what was funny, not his performance.
Right.
It was
Right.
people laughed at
What he's wearing.
Yeah, exactly. And he hated that. And they hated that the Carol Burnett show went for cheap laughs. You know, if you just laugh, the audience will laugh with you. Well, yeah. So
they want to be laughed at for what they've written, the material, rather than being whatever chaos has happened. Yeah.
And for a long time, Lauren wouldn't allow, certain things to happen. And then you get up to Stefan, where Mulaney, rewrites all the cue cards in between dress and performance. And the first time that Hader sees him is when he's on live on Update, and all the jokes are different, and it just cracks him up.
Yeah. I don't think there was
how
one
they got away with
Stefan where he didn't crack up at some point.
Well, I mean, Lauren considers Jimmy Fallon to be a great performer and a comic mind. And Jimmy, I mean, is pretty much a new Harvey Korman. He cannot keep a straight face. So I think Lauren has definitely lightened up on that side of things.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because now we have the Michael Che Colin joke switch, where it's basically the same thing, where they haven't read it before and they crack up. So
that is the most brilliant thing that they added to the format. I want to talk about some of the original skits that SNL did, either spoofing musicians or coming up with their own musical characters, like I'm thinking of the Blues Brothers, and Gilda did Candy Slice a couple of times, which I thought was amazing.
It was.
Who are the ones that you can think of along those lines that are dying? I got a couple that I can put out there.
Anything Fred Armisen did, a lot of what he did was making fun of musicians.
That's hilarious, because I did not care for him at all.
He had
what?
I did like his punk rock character who loved it, Margaret Thatcher, and they brought him back a few times.
I did also love his Prince.
I was going to say we were talking about Prince, and it's to Prince's credit that he kept coming back on the show. when they made fun of him on so many different occasions.
Absolutely.
John
and
Belushi.
They came up with all these strange groups like the Blue Jean Committee. They would come up with all these bizarre, bands that would play bizarre songs that were repetitive, and they did that for about 5 years straight.
Right.
John Belushi had a fantastic Joe Crocker impression, which I believe he did with Joe Crocker on
He
episode.
did.
Yeah.
Joe Cocker did not
You know,
appreciate that.
Really? I didn't know that.
I don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
Joe
Wow.
Crocker actually understood it.
I don't think Joe Cocker had a sense of humor anyway about much of
Wow.
anything.
Like I'm not
Which is quite as sad when you really look at the man and really encapsulate his life.
like there was an episode where he came on the show and he was singing side by side with John Belushi, who was doing his
Right.
Joe Crocker impression and,
Yeah,
and
the
singing
one.
along with him. And Joe Crocker didn't even seem to be aware that Belushi was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Belushi did it by himself, and then when Joe Cocker showed up, he did it with him. May not have told him ahead of time, but
Right. I
Right.
don't think they did. I think that he showed up on stage and Joe Cocker did not know to expect it. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it was definitely some strange
yeah,
situation.
yeah. If you watch it, Joe Cocker does not acknowledge that John Belushi's next to him.
Right.
Right.
It's hard to tell if it's ignorance or substance
Yeah.
abuse. In those
Right.
Well, that's a good point. And which brings up, well, actually, no, I want to continue with the topic that we've got. The Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup is
Yes.
one of the funniest things I have
Lucy
ever
Lawless,
seen
yeah.
in my life. And somehow I missed that episode when it first ran. The first time I ever saw it was when I bought the DVD box set of like 25 years of SNL performances, and it's on there. And I couldn't figure out who it was that was playing Stevie. I would never have guessed Lucy Lawless.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
and Lucy Lawless was interviewed, I don't know, years ago, not too long ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and she had no idea how popular that skit was. She just came on, did her thing. That was it. She had no idea that it had this life outside of the show, that it had been such a huge thing. But oh my God, that is
I think
so
that was
funny.
the late '90s, and so it may have been like 10 years before people rediscovered it online. So
Yeah.
I've never heard of this. I don't know
Oh,
what you're talking
well.
about.
Stevie Nicks now owns a Tex-Mex restaurant. and she sings, and now she dedicates her life to food. And I used to be into cocaine and the devil and Lindsey Buckingham, and now I dedicate my life to bringing affordable Tex-Mex meals to and they sing 3 Fleetwood Mac songs where she changes the lyrics to advertise her Tex-Mex dishes, and it is the funniest thing.
Okay. I'm gonna look this
Yeah,
up.
You
later.
have to look it up. It's so genius.
yeah,
I haven't seen that sketch in such a long time. I got to find
that's
it
exactly
myself.
the thing.
God.
Yeah, because
Oh.
that one is not officially available because of the Fleetwood Mac music. The musical sketches that we love
Right.
so much, so many you can't see officially because of the music rights. But the cowbell was so popular that NBC forked over the money, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely iconic. Iconic.
Well, talking about making fun of musicians, I wanted to bring up Charles Grodin passed away a few days ago, and he hosted that Saturday Night Live once, many years ago, and I believe Paul Simon was the musical guest, and when Paul Simon came out to perform, he came out and he was sitting on a wooden stool and he had his guitar, and he started to sing, and then Charles Grodin walked out on stage wearing an Art Garfunkel wig.
That's right.
Started singing the Art Garfunkel part.
Yeah, I think it was The Sound of Silence, and it was this,
Right.
very solemn song. And
And Paul Simon soldiered on for like 30 seconds and then finally stopped and turned to Charles Grodin and said, "You're making me really uncomfortable."
And then I think the real Garfunkel showed up to show up next to him or something at one point.
Yeah, but Simon and Garfunkel have reunited on the show. I don't know if that's the only place where they've reunited, but Art Garfunkel is
on television, probably. Yeah,
come back on the show and they've performed together again.
That and at their Fight Club.
If you go back and watch the second episode, it's like an entire Simon and Garfunkel concert. Because I guess they just didn't have enough material to make a full show, and they just put them out there and said, sing a bunch of songs. And it's really kind of awful. Not that they're bad, they're not bad. It's just that the cast isn't even in the episode, really.
Well, I think there was a lot of studio interference about what they put out in the first show, so they were kind of left like, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, no more bees, and that worked out.
But I was gonna say it's not even until the third or fourth episode when you really start to get to know who the cast is.
Yeah. I think the original idea was the cast were kind of like just there to fill in roles for little sketches, but weren't supposed to really shine. The star, the host or the musical guest was supposed to be the star.
Yeah.
Well, it was also a variety show, so anything could happen. We could have Harry Anderson doing magic tricks and whatever the hell Andy Kaufman. Was doing. There you go. You know, nowadays you don't really get that variety element outside of some sketches and music. You know, So it was much more unpredictable in that aspect.
That's very true. God, I had another one in mind that I wanted to talk about. Now I've forgotten it.
Wayne's World had such a musicality to it.
Yeah.
They had Aerosmith at one time,
Yes.
Who?
Wayne's World.
Wayne's World had Aerosmith as a guest one time. That was a good one.
Sure, Wayne's World was always about music.
Yeah.
So.
You know, another one that I really enjoyed was back in the 90s. There was 2 or 3 times that they did spoofs of Behind the Music. And they always got the actual behind the music narrator to narrate the skit. And one of my favorite ones, and I can't remember who the subject of it was, but the narrator says, you know, something bad happens, and it says, and that's when everything changed. And then another voice comes in and says, and that's when everything changes. Copyright VH1 and Behind the Music. And then the skit goes on to the rest of it, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And let's forget Eddie Murphy's repertoire: James Brown, Stevie Wonder,
and
of course Joe Piscopo's Frank Sinatra,
Little Richard Simmons,
and Buckwheat,
Buckwheat. Twice, 3 times I made it.
I'll tell you who gave a surprisingly good Mick Jagger. Tim Curry in his episode.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's true.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's
what
true.
I'm a fan of those hidden years.
You reminded me with...
Yeah.
You reminded me with Behind the Music. They did sort of a sketch where they kind of replayed it on a Behind the Music or VH1 something. But that's the only way I was able to see it later. And it was Neil Diamond, who kind of has a pretty squeaky clean image for the most part. But Will Ferrell played Neil Diamond. Neil Diamond is someone who was stoned out of his mind, openly talked about hating black people. I mean, just like completely ridiculous performance and everyone being like, Neil, are you okay over there? It's like, no, I'm Neil Diamond. I'll punch you in the mouth. Like that is, one of the perfect Will Ferrell things.
All right, so we're coming up on, we got about 10 minutes left. So is there any other things that we haven't covered that you can think of that we should have?
Great performers with bad performances.
Okay. And you have one.
The Rolling Stones were so terrible in their first time on the show. They were so drunk and so high, and they built the whole show around them. And it must be one of the worst performances they ever had. It was almost unintelligible, their entire set. And of course, you really can't blame substance abuse because Chris Christopherson was on the same year, I think. And they were so afraid that he was so drunk he wouldn't be able to perform.
Yeah.
He didn't even know.
Right.
He didn't even know.
Right.
Queen was terrible, and their one and only time on the show.
Yeah, that's right.
Was a travesty.
Wasn't Freddie Mercury sick or something? I think that was.
Was it actually filmed live? I mean, or broadcast from the UK? Because Dick Ebersol didn't understand the word meaning. I remember
reading that Freddie Mercury was under the weather, and so that might have been part of the reason they were so not good.
Well, in the UK, it's always raining, so that.
Yeah.
And then you have the truly awful ones, like the Technotronic one, where they're clearly singing to a track and the track gets off and the vocalist isn't keeping up with wherever the song is, and it was just a train wreck. And that's not even considering the Ashley Simpson travesty.
Yes.
Where
she came back later to perform. They did like a makeup performance.
Right. Where she blamed her band.
But the damage was done by that point. So.
Exactly. Terrible.
Well, actually, they started playing her song before her, and then she walked out.
Yeah. And then, I think that was one of the very few times Mad TV made fun of SNL, because Mad TV did a really brutal, impression or parody of that moment. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's one of those things you're going to see on the news the next day. For sure.
Yeah.
And wish you
had
seen it live.
I saw that live, and I was completely perplexed as to why she ran off and what was going on.
Yeah. But her voice seemed to echo and carry on as she went. That was a woman. What was the group that Charles Rocket loved? He had him put on the show, and they destroyed the stage.
You're talking about Fear.
Yes.
Fear? Was it Fear? Oh, God.
And it was actually John Belushi.
It was
who
Belushi.
By that point, could do whatever he wanted.
Right.
And he said, "Fine, I'll go on your SNL and have a cameo if you put these punk guys on." He's like, "Fine."
I remember now. He's out there in the launch pit, destroying the stage as well.
Yeah.
And it was a Halloween episode with Donald Pleasance, and so there was already, I guess, kind of a creepy vibe to everything. So they destroyed the set, and it's kind of fit with the vibe, I guess.
Also, that was a cursed episode, because I remember Donald Pleasance was a list of guests. They didn't think we're sober enough to do anything. So,
yeah, he was promoting Halloween too at that point. So,
oh dear, I can see Lord of the Wings. Just go on the stage, Belushi. Ruin that speaker, why don't you? Gene won't matter.
I know that Lana Del Rey went on and was fairly unknown, and people thought she was terrible, but she overcame that one. Right. So every once in a while, they overcome the bad performance. Sinead O'Connor, I think, was done. Her career more or less was done after her.
Who was that?
Sinead O'Connor. I mean, she did not really do anything of note after that.
You were saying they had to they had their own tab for their props and stuff. I wonder how much it took to cost that photo of the Pope. You think you could go back to Kinko's and go, "Can I get a refund?"
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to look back and see who destroyed their career by one SNL performance and who somehow survived.
I gotta think nobody has done that. I don't think SNL is powerful enough to kill anybody's career. If they
Ashley Simpson, I think they killed hers. I really do. She would know. Yeah. All anyone knew from her was that she did that lip sync thing. Like, that was what she's known for to this day.
But that brings up the question: was it already a lack of talent, or someone just finding you out you had a lack of talent? That's the question there.
I think that's it. I think she revealed her true self.
Yeah.
Not only by showing that there was a lack of talent, but then blaming her band for her mistake, for the error that happened, and it was not her band.
And props to Lorne for very clearly lying for her. Props to Lorne. I mean, no matter.
I know nothing about this. I don't know there was a backing track. I was not told this.
Right. Yes. They're going
as if anything that happens gets past Lorne.
Belushi's yeah, I mean, I think even the bad hosts don't really get like a huge career dent. I mean, Chevy Chase still has a functioning career, I guess. And Steven Seagal.
I know Adrian Brody did a terrible job and was banned, and he's kind of not really recovered from that either. So
yeah,
he did stuff here and there, but
I think if a host is terrible, I think the writers get blamed. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some hosts that are just awful, but I think a lot of times.
Paris Hilton.
I didn't think she was that bad.
A lot of people
Tina
think
Fey
this stuff
hated her,
is easy, but it's not.
Yeah.
The whole cast. Absolutely.
And not all performers are made the same. Some people have to have a script, have to have hours of memorization and everything just right. But you know what? Even the mistakes are part of the beauty of the show, really.
Yeah,
you never know what you're going to get. I don't like recently, The Baby. Absolutely hated the performance. Just the whole thing. I like most of the people around those couple of months, but then maybe when I was like, but you know what? Someone did, and that's great. I just kind of tuned out for that little bit of time, but that's part of the variety of it. What's left of the variety?
Yeah.
On an earlier topic, one of the ones that just came to mind that I really have loved is Maya Rudolph's Whitney Houston.
Yes.
Hilarious. And especially when Whitney kind of reemerged with that last album where her voice sounded not as good as it used to, and they kind of skewered that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about Janet Jackson. I think that was the only Jackson. They never had Michael. They never had the Five, obviously. Michael Jackson, never did it. And of course, they were pretty brutal to him over the years, too. But
they didn't have Bubbles?
Yeah. Amy Poehler's Michael Jackson was both brutal and hilarious all at the same time.
All right, so we got just a couple of minutes left. Any final thoughts? Any artists that you would like to see on SNL? Any thoughts about coming season?
I'm trying to think.
I haven't heard anything about the coming season.
There's not been much yet.
We anticipate people will be leaving, but we don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Like what's his name? Pete Davidson, more or less, said.
I'm sure he's out
the going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
fine.
No,
but he was such a presence in all the skits.
Right.
I feel like there was a deal this year where they were like, Pete, stay one more year. We promise we'll put you in more things. Because he clearly was in more stuff.
That really seems like what happened because he was in a lot of stuff. And even in cases where he's doing impressions and he's not an impressionist.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
plus,
he did
I wasn't surprised to see him hosting an episode because he has Suicide Squad coming out in the fall.
Yeah.
So that would be a good chance for him to kind of leave, but not leave.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And I think nobody wanted to be the person who left the show during the pandemic. So everybody stayed an extra year whether they wanted to or not. So.
Right.
Well, you wanted to leave doing it like you always had done it. Yeah. You don't feel like you had done the job quite right. It's going to be a difficult year for them because I think Kate's finally going to leave eventually.
Yeah.
And Keenan.
Keenan will never leave. I'm convinced.
He's sharing the same boiler closet with Daryl Hammond. It's going to be all right.
Exactly.
Hey, Keenan, have you done a Don Pardo impression before?
Yeah.
Something I know.
The cast are so big. They're big performers. There's plenty of people to like. Bowen Yang, I think, has a great. Someone to sprout further.
Right.
In terms of the performance. They'll be someone
new. Is brilliant too.
Yeah.
I would say the cast is a little too big now.
It's been way too big for quite a long time.
It's the biggest it's ever been. Yeah.
Like you don't need Beck Bennett, Alex Moffat, and Mikey Day. I mean, I can't even tell any of them apart. So just
50 Shades of White.
Get rid of any two of them, and you're fine.
I will defend Beck and Kyle. I know a lot of people don't like them. I like them as a pair.
No,
I know I'm unpopular.
I have not liked Kyle from day one.
Well, Kyle Mooney at least has a place. Kyle
does the stuff out of left field, and that's what
Kyle at least there's nobody else in the cast who is like him.
That's true.
Yeah.
But Mikey, Alex, and Beck are the undifferentiated white guys of the show.
Yeah. As I say, Beck is sort of Kyle's unofficial comedy partner. So I see them as a duo. But yeah.
Sure.
But speaking again, just final thoughts. Rihanna, I realized while doing research for this show, Rihanna has been on the show a lot. Mm-hmm. And I feel like she's always really good. Both her
and she did the Shy Ronnie sketch.
She did the Shy Ronnie, the two Shy Ronnie Lonely Island bits, and mm-hmm. I think she's really good. I haven't seen any of her acting outside of the show. I didn't see Battleship.
I want to say she's done a couple of movies.
Yeah, she has.
But
solid.
I always really enjoy her when she's on the show, and they must really like her too because they've had her like 6 or 7 times now.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year's the year they'll finally give Engelbert Humperdinck the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah,
Let him-
I was trying
let
to
him
think who
finally-
have they not had on who's still alive, and I'm stumped. But Ingleberg Company.
It's going to be an interesting season for sure. I mean, I think they'll have the full audiences back for sure.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
definitely.
by the time.
Mhm.
But I was just thinking back to when we had the last proper big cast changes, and I think it was Kirsten Wiig, and that was what year?
Mhm.
A decade ago, maybe now.
Yeah. The last.
And then at that
like,
point, you kind of thought
yeah.
it was the Kirsten Wiig show. You thought, what are we going to do now? I mean, obviously, you know
Well,
better.
when
Kristen.
Farrell left and then
McKinnon
Fallon
came
left,
along.
it felt like, what are you gonna go? Because those two were like big on the show, and when they left, it's like, what's gonna happen? And then we got
Yeah.
Kristen Wiig, and we got Bill
So-
Hader, and we got Stacey Sudeikis.
It's Kristen. It's Kristen, not Kirsten.
Sorry.
Kristen.
All right.
Yeah.
A-
So I
any
guess we'll
last-
see what happens.
Yeah, I guess we will. All right. So thank you all very much for hanging out with me tonight and talking about SNL.
It's been a pleasure.
I will be back next Sunday night with a show about rock and roll conspiracies. It's going to be fun. So thank you all so much. See you next time. Have a great week and
Thank you.
take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.